Hi, this is Teddy, and you're listening to Representative Sean Casten and me on Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast Podcast Network.
Are you listening?
Hey everyone, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Demcast family of podcasts. And for our 350th episode today.
Lucky 350.
Yes, we have a very special guest co-host today, and that is my son, Teddy.
Hi.
Teddy.
Hi.
And joining us today is a returning guest of the podcast, whom we have the rare privilege of getting to talk to live in person today, and that is Representative Sean Casten from the Illinois 6th District. Hello, Representative Casten.
Good morning, and thanks to Teddy for luring me out of my cave for this.
So this is pretty exciting. Longtime listeners will know that Teddy is on the podcast frequently, answering questions or doing introductions, but this is his first time getting to ask the questions. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Teddy.
Thank you. So one of my first questions for you is, what is Congress doing to fight climate change, and what more can be done?
So there's a lot more on the list of what more can be done. One of the first bills that we voted on this year was to return the United States to the Paris Climate Accord. And that was really important, but we shouldn't have had to do it, because the only reason we had to vote to do that was because President Trump took us out of the Paris Climate Accord that President Obama had put us in. And what the Paris Climate Accord says is that this is a global problem. Everybody in the world has to work on it, and we're all going to agree to work together. And that seems kind of like the bare minimum, but we voted to get back into that. I'm now working on the climate committee, and we're doing a whole bunch of rules ranging from trying to make sure that the way that electricity is regulated factors in CO2 emissions, to some work we're doing to require companies to quantify what the impact is of their greenhouse gas emissions so that people can invest money appropriately, to understanding how the banks are exposed to a changing climate. And this stuff is not really kid-friendly, I grant you, but we're doing a whole bunch of stuff on those fronts. But we need to do a lot more. And I think it's this challenge for issues where what's necessary exceeds what people think is politically possible. We need to count on people like you, Teddy, to keep pushing us to keep working harder, to make it more politically possible.
Do you think the technology is there? Do we have the technology we need to make these fixes? Is it just a matter of political will?
It is vastly technologically and economically easier than we widely characterize it as being. Mm-hmm. Whether we can get all the way to where we need to be with existing technology is a separate question. But to a certain degree, I think that the saying we can't do this because it's not economic or because the technology isn't there, or saying that we can't do this because political will isn't there, are all the last refuges of scoundrels. Yeah. Because there are countries, Switzerland uses half as much energy per dollar of GDP as we do. Thomas Edison's first power plant that he ever built was almost twice as efficient as the U.S. electric grid is today. This is not fundamentally a technology problem. It's fundamentally a regulatory problem that we have over-incentivized resource extraction and under-incentivized efficient resource conversion. And what that means is there's a lot of technologies we can use to convert energy more efficiently into useful goods and services, which means that we're going to have more money in our pocket if we just deploy existing technologies. And, I spent 20 years running clean energy companies before I got here. I never built a project that was less than twice as fuel efficient as the electric grid. And I also never built a project that didn't rely on a bunch of expired patents. So I think we can at least cut CO2 in half with no change in technology and no economic pain. We need to go farther than that, but my goodness, let's at least do that.
Yeah.
So the second thing I want to know is, what can kids do right now to make the world a better place?
Well, are you I don't know if you're a Cub Scout or a Weebelo or any of those things. I wasn't either, but
He's in the debate club.
All right. Well, I had a lot of friends that were. I say that because one of the things that the Boy Scouts always teach you is you should always leave the campsite cleaner than you find it. Right. So if you go camping, Don't just clean up your own mess, but walk around, and if you see that somebody left a candy wrapper on the ground, pick it up. Just make it a little cleaner. And we kind of got to treat the planet the same way. So when you walk around, do you throw your own trash away at school? Or do you also say, you know what, someone threw some trash over here by the trash can, let me clean that up? When you walk through a room, do you turn the light off when you leave your room? Or do you also go through and say, you know what, my mom left the light on in her bedroom closet, and I should probably turn that off too?
Well, Arthur is my brother, but he usually leaves the light on in different rooms. Just yesterday, he was in our bedroom, and he didn't turn the light off when he went back into our dining room, so I turned it off for him.
So here's the question. When Arthur does that, do you say, Arthur, get up here and turn the light off, or do you just turn the light off? Because that's kind of what we got to do is go through. Don't just spend our time yelling at people, but just go through and show them by our actions what the right thing is to do. Because then people might copy us.
I do tell him that. I do tell him that he really should remember to turn the light off, but I still turn it off for him.
And does he listen to you? Does he say, thank you so much for your wisdom? You've really turned me around on this issue. How old is Arthur?
He's 5.
Okay. All right. So you're kind of like his big brother. You can teach him what to do, right?
I am.
Yeah.
So the third thing I want to know is, what should I do now if I want to be a member of Congress someday?
That is a good question, because when I was your age, I really wanted to be a cartoonist. And then I thought I was going to be a professional soccer player and maybe an astronaut. And then I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. And then I ended up being like a scientist and an engineer. And then I ended up running some companies. So I didn't really know that I was going to become a member of Congress. I think the most important thing is find something that you really, really enjoy doing. Because if you really enjoy doing it, you'll kind of dig into it and you'll get better and better at it. And try to put yourself in situations where you have lots of opportunities. Because you never know where those opportunities are going to lead. But if you get really lucky, you'll find yourself at points in your life where you say, there's something that I really like and somebody is giving me an opportunity to do it. And you never know where that'll lead. It might lead you to being a member of Congress. It might lead you to being an astronaut. It might lead you to being, more than just a failed cartoonist like me. But make sure you're doing something that you think is really interesting. And when somebody opens a door, walk through it.
So what are some things that you find really interesting right now, Teddy?
Well, I find Shakespeare very interesting, and I am in a Shakespeare club at school.
Really? What plays of Shakespeare's do you like the most?
Julius, well, this is the only one we've done so far, and we didn't even get through the whole thing yet, but Julius Caesar.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I read a little bit of that one. Do you get to be one of the characters in it?
He's the understudy for everything.
Oh, all right. So have you come to praise Caesar or to bury him?
Well,
do you know that line?
Yes.
He said, yeah.
Brutus says Caesar is ambitious, yet Brutus is an honorable man.
Oh, there we go. I like it.
When the poor hath cried, Caesar hath wept. Yet ambition should be made of sterner stuff.
Very good. So you know what I like? One of the things I really like about Shakespeare is that he somehow managed to understand how really fancy rich people thought, like King Henry and Julius Caesar. And then he also kind of understood how, the town bum, like John Falstaff, how he talked. And Shakespeare had this ear of understanding how everybody at every level of society thinks and talks.
We're not actually doing the whole play, so I don't know that.
But are there people in Julius Caesar who are really powerful people?
Yeah.
Are there people who are not very powerful people?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And he kind of understands how both of them think, right? That was pretty neat about Shakespeare.
Your fellow members of Congress, do they have a lot of different backgrounds that different things they did before they came to Congress?
So I maintain that I am part of the coolest class that's ever been elected to Congress. And I think that's a factual statement, not just an opinion, because our class has so many people in it who never ran for office before, but have a lot of other experiences that they were there. And historically, part of the answer to your question, Teddy, is that historically the way you get to be a member of Congress is first you become a local politician in your town, and then maybe you become mayor, and then maybe you work for the state house, and then you run for federal office. I didn't do that. I decided to run for Congress because I wasn't happy about what Trump was doing. And within our class, we have a whole lot of people like that who were doing really interesting things before. You ever have Talenti ice cream? Super, super tasty ice cream. Dean Phillips, who founded Talenti Ice Cream, was the CEO of Talenti, and he didn't like what Trump was doing, and so he ran. So now Dean and I are the two former company presidents who were there. Johanna Hayes from Connecticut was the National Teacher of the Year. So she was the best teacher in the whole country. And then she said, you know what, I think I should run for Congress. And so she ran, and she's there. We have two people in my class who were former spies. They worked for the CIA, Abby Spanberger and Alyssa Slotkin. And they were doing really cool stuff that I'm not allowed to know about and you're not allowed to know about. But it was pretty cool. Abby told me that her kids love it because she has a really cool costume box in her house because she had all these disguises she had to wear.
And she lets her kids play with it?
Yeah, well, she doesn't have to use them anymore. But now she's a member of Congress. There's all these people who did these really, really interesting things before and felt like, you know what, there's things that I know about. I know a lot about something very specific that really matters for Congress, and I think that there's some things the federal government isn't doing that are really important to what I know, so let me go and run for Congress. And that's pretty – I think it makes our class much not as broad as some of the classes above us, but much deeper.
So my final question is, what inspires you when things seem difficult?
I have the coolest job in the world because – on any question that I have, I can go and I can pick up the phone and I can get somebody who is super smart and knows a ton about that to come and talk to me. And so when things seem really hard, if I say, there's this really important decision that's coming up and I have to know what it is and I don't know anything about this and how did I possibly get this job? I can go and I can get super, super smart people to come and talk to me about it and learn where they are. So sometimes that's people who you probably don't know anything about. I get to spend time with, Ben Bernanke. I'm sure he's a hero to the second grade class. Had breakfast with him. Yeah, he's not real popular with second graders, but I also get to meet people like last week. I got to go meet Chris Evans. Do you know him? He's Captain America. Have you seen the Captain America movie? And I went to meet with him because he's doing sort of interesting stuff in politics and has an interesting view on how he can use his celebrity to get people thinking about politics.
You mean he got to meet with you?
Yes. He's bragging. He is on a podcast right now bragging about that he got to meet me, I'm sure.
Well, I'm thinking that that's a coincidence. I mean, he's in politics and concerned of the future of America, and that's what Captain America is. Could be.
He was also in Knives Out, which is sort of more of like a murder mystery. So I don't know if that's about the future of America. But you do. It's a good question. But I think as long as you like learning things, you can learn anything you want in this job. And when things are really hard, it's usually because you don't exactly know what the right thing is to do. And so you can get smart people around to give you good advice and wisdom.
So I have a question that's a little more of a grown-up question, but I think it's applicable to kids as well. And that's, you're in a district that flipped from Republican to Democrat in 2018, but you're pretty forthright and candid about how you feel about the state of the country, what's happening, what you think the right thing to do is at any given time. And I know sometimes politicians are fairly careful, testing the waters, and not sure what to say. But what's your advice for all people, for kids, for adults about being brave, about saying what the right thing is?
So I've developed a certain sort of philosophy of this job in the last year, which, look, let's be honest, comports with beliefs I had beforehand. All right, I'm not saying this is like a huge intellectual leap, but I think I've got a deeper understanding of where the country is right now, and that's that I think our founders created this democracy that works perfectly if everybody understands the issues and if you believe that the majority of people are fundamentally decent. If you don't believe that the majority of people are fundamentally decent, democracy is a real problem. And if your views are not aligned with the majority of people, then democracy is a real problem for you individually, right? And what I've found is that if you're open and candid about where your views are, and keeping in mind that beautiful Edmund Burke quote when he said that your representative and I forget the exact word, but he said, your representative owes you his judgment, and he betrays you if he sacrifices his judgment to your opinion. And I think if you're open about what your opinion is and you're honest and you share the truth and you trust democracy, then what you find is that the majority of people are kind of good people who have a similar set of values, who do indeed believe in the principles of our Constitution. And what may seem brave for sort of standing up and saying, I disagree with you on that issue, and if you don't like that, then, if that's determinative for you, don't vote for me, but I'm going to be true to who I am. That people actually appreciate that for the same reason they appreciate that in any other line of work. You don't go into your office in the day and say, I'd like to know your opinion, but I recognize you won't share it with me because you're just going to echo what I say. You don't expect that in any line of work. Yeah. I think the challenge we have right now in the country is that it has become partisan to be committed to democracy. And there is such a huge difference between the values as shared by the majority of voters, including but not limited to voters who traditionally vote Republican, and the values as shared by the majority of elected Republican officials who are working actively to suppress access to information. Every single Republican senator voted against having evidence in the impeachment case because they are nervous about what would happen if the American public was educated.
Are you talking about me?
No. No.
So, Teddy, what he is saying is that you know about the impeachment and about the hearing that the Senate did. Well, the Republican senators said they didn't want any evidence. Should a trial have no evidence?
No. How else would it be a fair trial? And it wouldn't even be a trial without evidence.
Yeah, that's what they voted. That's exactly right. That's what they voted for.
The 8-year-olds get it.
Yeah, exactly. You should run for Congress, Teddy. Better yet, the Senate. But I think that, and it's hard to talk about that, right? Because it sounds partisan to even say it. But when you have people, voting, we had 183 people who voted against the Equal Rights Amendment. What possibly is wrong with saying that we won't discriminate on the basis of gender? The Equality Act was a fairly partisan vote. Fixing the Voting Rights Amendment or amendments so that we can essentially undo the damage of Shelby versus Holder and recognize that everybody should have access to the right to vote was a partisan vote. That's not partisan because the majority of the public is opposed to it. It's partisan because a majority of people whose access to power depends on making sure that not everybody has access to information and not everybody has the same incentive to vote. And there's a difference there. And so I think in this moment, it's not so much the courage to stand up and be honest about your opinions as much as that if you believe in democracy in this moment, I think you have an affirmative obligation to redouble your commitment to it and be out there educating, speaking, making sure people understand what's actually going on, including saying some of the things that are going on are opinions that I have that you may disagree with, but let's be honest about it. Let's not sit there and try to use some weasel words to convince you that I agree with everybody.
Teddy, can you think of ideas that we could get more people to know what's going on and be educated about all the issues in the country?
We could put all the evidence that climate change is real and that Donald Trump should be convicted in the news.
Okay. How would we get it to the news?
You're a representative, right? You could,
That's why I go on podcasts like this, is to spread the word.
So everyone should listen to the podcast.
Yep.
Yeah. Are there things that kids in your class, for instance, will pay attention to and listen to?
Well, maybe a cartoon about all this.
A cartoon?
There you go.
Oh.
I mean, like a whole series about different reasons about all this that we're talking about. It's true.
Schoolhouse Rock. You ever watch that?
You've seen how a bill becomes a law?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
We could make more Schoolhouse Rock about that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So you should check out what Chris Evans is doing. He's doing this thing called, this is Captain America. I think it's called, is it A Better Place? Do you remember? He's about to release, it's coming out in March. And what he's doing is he's bringing on members of Congress just to speak about one issue that's really important to them. And then building a whole website so that people like you want to sort of understand what's going on, he can do it. And then he's going to set up something after that where you can find an issue where you have another member you disagree with, and you'll do video talking, like essentially responding to each other's points, with the idea that you could have something where, where Teddy or someone like you could say, boy, I got a real question about climate change, or about, what it costs to pay for schools, and so you could go and you could look on his website and you could find people talking about exactly those issues and sort of have it all organized. So it should be, hopefully it'll be pretty cool.
What is your favorite thing about the Illinois 6th District?
My favorite thing about the Illinois 6th District, well, it's not the beautiful mountains. It's not the skiing. We moved out here from the East Coast because we had kids. We wanted to have good schools for them. I was coming out here to start a company, and I wanted to be in a place where there were like a lot of really talented people, and it was sort of affordable to live here. And this is a pretty great place to live. It's a pretty great place to raise a family. I'm delighted we moved out here, even though I do kind of miss the mountains and the skiing that I had when I lived back in New England. But my favorite thing about Chicago is improv comedy. Have you been to the improv comedy? There's even a lot of good kids improv comedy in Chicago.
There is now an improv right in the 2nd District in Hyde Park in Chicago where we live. So I think we're going to sign Teddy up for some classes.
Here's my recommendation. You know what we should go to, Teddy?
What?
We should go to Improv Shakespeare. Have you ever been to that?
No.
They do totally improvised comedy, but it's all a Shakespearean play. So everything rhymes. And they do a whole Shakespearean play that they just make up from things that people show from the audience. It's pretty neat. And it's kind of kid-friendly. I took my daughters to it. You'd like it.
That sounds right up your alley.
Wait a minute. How old were your daughters?
My daughters are 12 and 15.
Close enough.
Actually, now they're 13. My youngest daughter just turned 13, so now they're 13 and 15.
All right. Any more questions that you have?
No, not really.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to make sure we talk about?
No, thanks. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
Always fun.
All right.
Nice to see you, Teddy.
Nice to see you too.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.